Hello, and welcome to the Module 9 commentary video, Technology Part 1 for LIS 886. As we prepare to travel between the space and time mediums, please take a moment to adjust your video and sound settings. If you encounter any difficulty in viewing this video, please contact me as soon as possible. Prior to viewing this video for Module 9, please read pages 121 to 149 in the Safety text. Also, please read the handout on Canvas called In Search of a Paperless Office by J. Anthony Vital. Additionally, please read the handout on Canvas called Microfilm Still Matters in the Digital Age by Brandy Scardilli. Directions on where to locate the handout will be available in your Module 9 to-do list on Canvas. Welcome to the first of two commentary videos on the hottest trend in the RIM field, technology. RIM technology in the 21st century changes so fast, new recommendations and laws and best practices also seem to sprout up on an almost daily basis. While you do not need to have a PhD in information technology to understand the principles of technology as they relate to RIM, you must be able to quote-unquote speak the language of technology in a RIM program manager position. No matter if you're a self-professed technology geek or a neophyte, these next two modules will serve as a crash course in technology as it relates to RIM function in that space. For our first module, we will focus on the nuts and bolts of technology, setting the stage for the second module on electronic record management systems and email management. So, put on your pair of Google Glass and let's rock and roll. As a RIM program manager, you will be constantly bombarded with statistics about electronic storage medium growth and maybe the contents of your electronic records management system or applicable network drives. Though I do not expect you to memorize the progressions of bytes in size, please focus in on the four listed on your screen and know which one is bigger than the other. It is likely you'll be working with gigabytes or terabytes of data, perhaps if you start soon, though you may foray into petabytes and exabytes if your company is very large. Regardless, make sure you at least know the basic progressions of sizes when it comes to bits and bytes and have a general sense of what people are talking about from your IT department when they say trends in growth and different things like that. Speaking of storage, you must also be able to speak the language of computers to your friends in the IT department. On the screen are four common operating systems on the market at the moment. As a crude definition, an operating system is a software which allows your computer to run. At the very least, you need to know the version of Windows or maybe the Apple system, operating system, the OS X that you're running on for companies, and at least know that Microsoft Windows 7 is different than Microsoft Word 2010. As a sidebar, nothing more embarrassing than being in a meeting with IT professionals or having to call the help desk and not knowing what operating system you're working with. This became a big issue lately because Windows XP recently expired from the Microsoft network, and the day it did, there were lots and lots of viruses that were released. So a lot of companies forced their folks to upgrade to Windows 7 because there were really no patches to help keep Windows XP safe anymore. So this was a big thing I dealt with as a RIM manager as recently as 2 weeks ago. So make sure you're on top of the biggest operating systems and know which versions are supported and which ones may be prone to viruses and other things like that. Speaking of Microsoft, you may be consulted as a RIM manager to assist in the cleanup of shared spaces or the identification of key files in the case of discovery. Listed on the screen are common file types and the extensions for popular productivity software. While this is nowhere an exhaustive list, it will give you the basic concept of what you might find in use in your organizations. Be sure to be familiar of the various software suites available in the marketplace and what they can do. And then there will be pictures. As a RIM program manager, you will likely come across these various picture formats as seen on the screen. In fact, you may come across some even not listed on the short list. Bottom line, though you will not be asked to speak as a computer science expert, it is highly likely that you will come across these files in a shared space audit or be required to save source document images in these formats so they can be imported into records management systems. By being familiar with the file extensions and at least an idea of what they're meant for, you will be better equipped to help program unit managers best handle their records. As a RIM program manager, it is very important to be familiar with the various technologies available on the market for file storage. As the most basic level, program units can store files on the local network, otherwise known as the C drive for PC-based machines. While cheap and easy, storing files on a local drive comes with a whole host of problems. For instance, I bet at least a small proportion of the data breaches you read about a few weeks back were the cause of program unit staff storing local copies of sensitive data only to have them stolen. As a RIM program director, it terrifies me to visit program units only to find desktops full of Excel and Access files. As you know from a few slides back, Excel and Access are the files used for statistical data management. And with statistics, typically comes personally identifiable information such as IDs, social security numbers, and credit card numbers. Other means of storage for local shared networks do exist. In most organizations, unit program staff are given shared storage spaces known as shared drives. In this example, multiple staff members are granted access to a storage space, typically assigned a letter to a drive on a network computer, where they can store items and collaborate. While a great place to file items if used correctly, shared drives can sometimes contain records such as performance evaluations, contracts, and other items which should be restricted from general access. Also, and probably most prevalent, shared spaces can become junk drawers, leading to large, unorganized file repositories. Another popular form of storage is known as the cloud. In its basic form, the cloud is a storage space found outside of an organization, typically hosted by companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, and so on, where program units remotely access files that do not need to be concerned with having them in a local network infrastructure. While the cloud is certainly cheaper, less resource intensive for storage, it also has many drawbacks to consider in selecting the right storage medium. For one, some laws strictly prohibit the use of cloud storage for information storage. Also, you are at the mercy of the cloud storage provider in terms of up and down time, upgrades, and overall performance. If you elect to use cloud storage, be sure to have a strong service level agreement and clause for reclaiming files. More on service level agreements and clauses for reclaiming files in a few weeks when we talk about procurement and litigation. A few more items to consider regarding technology relate to the actual administration of computer networks. Again, a hiring manager will not expect you to act both as a RIM program manager and an IT guru. In most all cases, organizations will have dedicated in-house or contracted outsourced IT staff. You will, however, be expected to know the basic IT terms and how they relate to RIM as a program manager. In fact, Section 5 of the Certified Records Manager exam deals exclusively with technology and most of the terms that we're going to be covering in this class. Speaking of IT, your organization will likely have someone on the staff called a system administrator, typically known as the sysadmin. This can be one person or a group of folks who manage portions of the technology infrastructure at the organization. For example, my organization has multiple administrators, and I work very closely with the administrator for the electronic document management system. Regardless, this person will be responsible for quote-unquote keeping the lights on and will likely manage server activity, monitor storage, and approve storage requests in addition to a whole bunch of other tasks. Basically, if you can't figure it out on the front end, the system administrator will likely help you on the back end. Get to know this person. Take him or her out for drinks. Buy them cupcakes. Send presents at holidays. Whatever it takes to have them drop everything for you if you need them. Another technology concept to be familiar with at an organization is what's called the Active Directory. While your company may not choose to use Microsoft's Active Directory as its actual program, what this does, however, is it provides Windows version domain authentication. Seriously, you ever had a word that you just can't say out loud? It will authenticate the domain for you, which means basically in this scenario, when you first started at Dominican, someone at the IT department took your first and last name and established a username and password for you. For example, they created TD Kleine for me. Then, at some point during your orientation, you were given this username and generic password so you could access Dominican's computer. Your username and password were entered into Dominican's instance of Active Directory, and you were given quote-unquote clearance to access the network. The same thing will happen at your organization, and you will hopefully have some hand in this as a RIM professional. I mention Active Directory because the granted username and password are basically the keys to the castle when it comes to network security. As a part of your offboarding process, be sure if someone's fired that they lose their Active Directory credentials. Also, most document management systems will allow Active Directory integration. This means that you can allow program unit staff the ability to use their username and password to access other systems. In practice, you will hear this called single sign-on, which is quite popular as it limits the number of usernames and passwords that are required for staff members. Finally, make sure your organization has a robust firewall in place. For the sake of this class and even RIM program management, just know that a firewall is a barrier which theoretically stops intruders from tinkering with your internal organizational assets. The firewall will be managed by your IT staff, so I would recommend having a discussion with your internal folks to see what sorts of means of protection are in place for safeguarding your network. With this foundation in place, let's talk a little bit about the concept of scanning. I'm going to go through some of the basics of scanning technology just so you can get a sense of things you need to think about as you start consulting with program units who say that they want to go from paper to paperless. Okay, so I often get a question as a RIM program manager as to why would I want to convert from paper into digital images? Well, there are 5 really good reasons on the screen. Not only will it save very precious blueprint space in your office, you can also have a very good means of disaster recovery as well too when it comes to converting from paper to electronic. Just think about the tornadoes in Joplin or other instances like that. Had they not scanned in some of those documents and stored them off-site, a tornado, an earthquake, a nuclear meltdown, anything like that could cause complete chaos and a discontinuation at some level of operations for the organization. Having items electronic can also provide better security control. It's just easier to have things electronically than having somebody, who's disgruntled walking into an office and taking off with a couple files. For financial reasons, it also makes great sense. Once you do actually get converted to an electronic environment, it is cheaper, and there have been return on investment studies that will prove this. And finally, it's great for business and operational reasons. Again, should you need to be able to work off-site or have some kind of disaster, having your files electronic means all you have to do is somehow get access to the server, and you can continue operations from a remote site where at all possible. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about situations that you might confront when folks in a program unit tell you that they want to go from paper to paperless. The first thing you need to do is identify what are called the source documents. You need to know, are all the files currently in, manila folders, in a filing cabinet? Are they in boxes? Where are they at? First, get a sense of what you have. Then what you need to do is put together a realistic scanning plan. How many files do you have? What's the average number of pages in a file or document? What size paper are they? Do they have paper, for example, that has watermarks or different things like that on them? Are they 1 or 2-sided? Are they black and white? Do you need them in color? And probably, I would say maybe most importantly, if you are going to tackle a large project, do you want to say everything for this fiscal year and forward will be converted to digital and then will remain the rest of the documents on paper until such time that you need to destroy them? Or are you basically going to throw all of your chips in and say we're going to dedicate all the time up front to scanning everything? Okay, you'll have to make that decision. Once you have those file plan elements in place, you're then going to want to start thinking about document preparation. If you're going to put items through a scanner, you need to take out paper clips, binder clips, staples, all those different things like that. Scanning equipment is not cheap, and the last thing you want to do is get approved for a couple $1,000s worth of scanning equipment to turn around and break them with paper clips. Realistic scenario, I've seen people do that before. So just something you want to think about. Let's first talk about document pages and volume. If you're going to be consistently scanning in, let's say, medical records, financial records, archival records, different things, and there's some consistency to what's being put into the system, that being scanned, make sure that you take a look that all of the pages need to be scanned in. So here's an example of a government form that's 3 pages. Okay, the example on the left, a department that I decided to work with said that they only really needed to scan 2 of the 3 pages because one of the pages that they were scanning in was simply directions, and there was no need to capture the directions. As you can see on the screen, scanning 2 pages versus 3 pages is a pretty decent size savings in megabytes. If you take that and multiply it by 10,000 files, for example, you're paying for a lot of storage space for something that you don't need in the system. Okay, so it's just something to think about. Just because a file, for example, has 3 pages doesn't mean all 3 pages have to go in. And storage does come with a cost, so you're going to want to think about that. You're also going to want to think about document size and a document paper. The example on the left is an academic example. This is an example of a transcript. When you scan or copy a transcript, you can see the watermark on the back which says copy. Now, in some cases, you'll be able to get them scanned into the system with no problem. But in other cases, you may have to adjust your scanner settings to make sure that the copy watermark on the back doesn't overwhelm the exact text that's actually on the document. These are things to consider. You're also going to want to think about the size of your paper. Some scanners are better than others in terms of how they can accept different paper sizes. Okay, so if you know you're going to have a lot of super A3/B documents in the 19 by 13 setup, you want to make sure your scanner can actually take that in. Okay, seems kind of obvious and maybe at some level silly, but I'm surprised at the number of folks that think they can pull off scanning projects only to find out that they have the wrong size scanner for the paper they're putting in. Let's talk about simplex versus duplex. It's actually a very easy thing to consider. Are all of your documents one-sided? Are all of your documents two-sided? Do you have a combination of both? Some scanners have programs called virtual rescan. Some also have built-in features that allow the scanner to be able to detect a blank page and then kick the blank page out of the system. So you don't have to go in and delete white blank pages. Okay, so if your scanner's not smart enough to know the difference between simplex and duplex, make sure that you at least invest in a software that'll let you do that, or try to set up the scanning project to where you can image all of the one-sided or simplex documents at once and then all the duplexes at a different instance. Okay, that way you're not creating more work than you actually need for yourself. Let's talk about quality. There may be some instances where the documents can be in black and white, or you may have regulations which basically tell you that you have to put them in color. So make sure you know what is required. Most scanning projects you can really do things in black and white with no issue, but make sure you know what is important for you. I also get a lot of questions about what needs to be the dots per inch or the pixel in terms of images. What I would really tell you is if you're going to scan items in, make sure that the quality setting on your scanner is really somewhere between 200 and 300 dpi. You don't want to have it too low because then you can start getting into situations where you can't read the image that comes out there. But if you get it too high, it's going to slow down your scanning project as the documents will go through the scanner slower. Okay, so make sure that you understand that. I also cannot emphasize enough having quality assurance procedures in place. Now, you don't have to have a multi-step procedure. However, you will find that some document management systems actually make you go through a step where you have to OK, quote unquote, the file that you see in front of you that's imaged so that it marks in the back of the system that you actually looked at it. If you don't have quality assurance procedures in place on the scanner that you're using, at least just make sure that you're looking at the files before you shred them. Because remember, once you image something, the electronic version of it becomes the record, and you're not required to keep the paper anymore. So you want to make sure before you part with your paper that you have a suitable image. Seems very easy, but if you really start outsourcing some of your scanning, you want to make sure that you at least have quality images. Let's talk a little bit about some of the scanners you may see on the marketplace. Now, these are two examples of scanners that I use in my organization, the one on the left being the sheet or the document feed scanner, and the one on the right being a document feed scanner plus a flatbed. Okay? Again, you will need to know what types of documents you're putting in the system. If you're going to be putting in just 8.5 by 11 documents, you may want to get just a basic sheet or document feed scanner. However, if you're scanning things like state IDs or passports or different things like that, you may need some kind of flatbed technology because some of those items don't go through document feed scanners the way you want them to. So make sure you know your options that are out there. You may want to buy from Canon or Epson or Fujitsu or something like that. Just a good walk around like a Staples or an Office Max will give you a sense of what the scanners are out there on the market. Okay, one of the biggest questions I get as a RIM program manager would be, where do I start when it comes to imaging my documents? Okay, now I'm at two schools of thought on this. If you have the resources available to you, meaning that you have temporary employees, interns, different things like that, and you decide that you want to commence a scanning project in your organization, it may be helpful to scan everything that you have. And here's the reason why. If you have the people power and you scan everything you have, then you have all of your documents either electronic or you have them on paper. You don't have a split system. However, you may get into a situation where you don't have the people power, but you need to start somewhere. That's where I would advocate for a day one or a scan date forward project, meaning, for example, the start of the next fiscal year for most companies is July 1st. So you may want to say that anything created July 1st, 2014 and forward will be scanned, and everything prior to that will remain on paper until such time that you will then destroy the paper when it hits the end of its retention period. One drawback to this process is you have some items on paper and some items electronic, and it can be confusing for staff members. But again, the advantage is it doesn't require you to do so much work up front. You may want to do some hybrid of the two of these, but think through what's going to be most realistic for your organization. Are you going to scan everything at once, or are you going to pick a date and just move forward? Okay, so that's important to consider. So once you scan the items, then you want to think about where are you storing them. Are you putting them in an electronic document management system that you own? Is it going on a shared drive? Is it going somewhere else? Be sure that you have that plan in place and you know how to organize those files. When we get into the second technology lecture coming up next week, I'll talk to you a little bit about some best practices for filing away electronic documents. But all I really want you to consider right now would be, what are those options after you actually run the file through the scanner? Let's talk really quick about Micrographics 101. You're going to hear talk about microfilm, microfiche, different things like that. Some people will argue to you in the 21st century that microfilm is really a thing of the past. Okay? This is the case in a lot of organizations. However, in some governmental entities and different things like that, you are still going to come across retention schedules dictated by the state that require you to keep things on microfilm. There's lots of good reasons to keep it, and Safety does a great job talking through these in the text for you. I want you to pay attention to the text and the descriptions that are given to you, and let me just highlight a few things that you'll want to know. Okay, so the key things to know are on the screen right now. With microforms, just know that they're a photographic information carrier and they require magnification for view. Okay, so you're going to have some kind of reader that's going to allow you to see the microforms. When it comes to reduction, just know that it's the number of times that a microform or microfilm is reduced given a linear dimension. Typically, you're going to see it 15 times, 24 times, 48 times, and so on. Also, when it comes to microfiche, make sure you know that those are sheets of film which contain micro images, and they're governed, or at least best practice driven, by ISO 9923. Okay, so I want to make sure you at least have a familiarity with these, and then pay attention to some of the things that Safety is talking about in the text. Also, make sure to know that there may be situations that your company or organization may have a microfilm camera. Okay, so these are special cameras, as you know, that are used for microfilming, so you can take a look, you can produce them, you can read them, stuff like that. If you have no idea of anything related to microfilm, microforms, microfiche, you're going to want to think about retaining an expert, okay? I'll be the first to tell you this sort of stuff is not my wheelhouse just because I don't deal with it on a regular basis. However, if I ever got into a situation that I needed to do work with that, I would immediately be going for the experts that are available through some of the companies that we found in offsite record storage and imaging, okay? Also remember, there is something called computer output microfilm, which is basically a printer for microfilm from your computer. Okay, so just know that that is a technology that's out there still. And that brings us to the first part's ending of technology for LIS 886. We will return next week and dig more into technology components. If you have any questions or would like to discuss any of these elements further, please do not hesitate to give me a jingle. Have a great week.